What is up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me is my great co-host, Ralph Hanna, and here we are, another episode of Guarani Vision. We're about to end the month, a leap year, actually, that we're going to be having, so we get an extra day in February, but that doesn't mean football stops. Football is continuing all around the entire world, be it the Paraguayan teams happening in South America, be it happening Paraguayans abroad, and also a Paraguayan team that are playing in America right now. It's kind of the central hub right now for Paraguayan football as a whole for the last week or so, with the W Gold Cup happening in Houston for the Paraguayan national team, with Diego Gomez playing for Inter Miami, and of course MLS starting. So that means a lot of Paraguayans that are playing all across the country and Canada. Can't forget just Kulas in Vancouver. But yeah, no, I'm definitely excited to see what happens as we enter another new month. Obviously friendlies are about to happen. The game against Russia, I think that's going to be a big thing, especially given the fact that Paraguay did in the Preolímpico, and of course happening for players abroad, like I had mentioned with Diego Gomez. But let's go into that in about a few minutes. Let's go to Ralph here first, who was definitely a happy Paraguay fan after being in Houston yesterday for Paraguay's 1-0 win against Costa Rica. And actually, let's start with that. Let's start with that because obviously it's fresh off our memory, and Paraguay are participating in this tournament for the first time ever. It's the first time that a tournament has happened that you get kind of a competition where you get all the teams from or at least the big teams from CONCACAF and four from South America, which, if you remember, during the Copa America Femenina, which served as qualification for the Women's World Cup, it was the top four that finished there. So you had Brazil, who were the winners, the runners-up Colombia, and the third place team, Argentina, who all went to the World Cup, but it was Paraguay who had to go to that playoff spot, was unable to do so. But as kind of a reconciliation, they are going to play in this Gold Cup, and they got off on the right foot. Going to go 1-0 win the other day off a really good set piece. Lisi Chamorro getting the win, getting the winner for Paraguay over there at Shell Energy Stadium in Houston. And obviously, Ralph, you were there. First of all, welcome. And I think it's a good thing to start off that because it's a big win. It's a big win for Paraguay. It's a really big test for them as a whole, participating in this group with Canada and with El Salvador. But certainly the win yesterday was a good confidence boost for this team and their chances to qualify out of the group.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Roberto. Thank you, everybody who's watching, listening. We are in a good mood today because, like you say, not only are Paraguay in Houston, which is kind of a crazy crossover to have Paraguay down in Texas, but also that they won yesterday and what was really, I think, the crucial game for the group against a Costa Rica team that's ranked above them in the FIFA rankings, has some very strong players playing in Mexico mostly. So it was going to be a big test, and it's funny you mentioned the World Cup, missing out on the World Cup. That was a year to the day that they failed to go. It was 23rd of February, New Zealand time. It was 22nd of Feb over here. But it's been exactly a year, and there's been kind of a lot of changes because, of course, Frigerio, the coach, left. His assistant at the time, Carlos Bona, is now the head coach. Yesterday was his 10th game in charge. Well, 10th game, according to Paraguay, I would only count 6 because they're seven, because they're including 3 friendlies against Brazilian clubs. I don't know if we can count those as official. But anyway, it's this new kind of team that they're trying to build up, looking forward to 2027. But at the same time, they don't have enough of this new generation to kind of push away everybody that's been playing previously, like Dulce Quintana, like Veronica Riveros, the captain. So it's kind of a mixed team, I would say. And I wasn't sure how is that going to play out on the pitch. And I think we saw in the first half, really, they did struggle a lot because firstly, they played with a back 5, which Paraguay isn't always used to. And you could see the kind of, not confusion, but I guess you could just see that the team wasn't they were almost detached, right? The lines between midfield, defense, and the forward line. And they were really struggling, and Costa Rica did very well with the space there. Costa Rica hit the bar after like 7 minutes, nearly followed up with the goal straight after. They had a penalty awarded, and this was a strange CONCACAF moment for people that follow CONCACAF. The penalty was awarded. The player was standing over the penalty, Raquel Rodriguez, for about a minute. And then the referee said, "Oh wait, we need to go to VAR," and didn't uphold the decision because it didn't really look like a handball. I was right in line with it, and that kind of gave Paraguay, I guess, the let off, and that kind of did spur them into I think a bit more intensity. And then in the second half, we saw a change in formation, reverting to classic Paraguay set piece goal, and then they held on for a 1-0 win. And this was actually really important and something I talked to a couple of the players about after the game. This is only the second time they've kept a clean sheet in this year under Carlos Bona. So it's really been trying to get that defensive shape and that defensive stability right. And it was something that they finally did last night. And that 1-0 win puts them in the driving seat really for qualification.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I think certainly now looking at the group, and we were speaking about it before the show started, is that because of Canada's win against El Salvador 6-0, Paraguay have to play Canada in their next game on the 25th. So certainly we have to wait and see what happens. I think Paraguay are huge underdogs in that game. But certainly if they are able to get a result from there, then that kind of really confirms their spot to the next round because of how the way the format works. It's basically three groups of four. So that means you have 12 teams. The top two qualify from those three groups. And then you have a third place ranking where the top two of the third place teams qualify to the knockout stage. So Paraguay really are in a good position, especially on the final day against El Salvador on the 28th. So that puts them in a good spot, Ralph, really. And then it just depends on who they play. I mean, certainly from what we saw so far in this competition, the United States, they're always going to be top favorites. I think rightly so. They really demonstrated that in their 5-0 win against Dominican Republic. Colombia, a team that really have kind of become the kind of darlings from the last Women's World Cup. They smashed 6 against Panama, the team that eliminated them in the qualifying process and to the Women's World Cup. Brazil are always going to be there, Argentina, Mexico. So, I think this is a good opportunity for them to make a good run. And I think, I don't expect them to win this competition. Canada, of course, they're always up there too as the top favorites. Like I don't expect them to be the top team to win this competition, but at least for these group of players, for this confidence to be boosted by the way that they perform is going to be hugely dependent on how they do in this competition.
Yeah, that's right. This is very much, I think, about gaining experience and looking ahead to 2027. Even in the press conference pre-game and even post-game, Carlos Bona was talking. He's talking about the process. He's talking about the future. This is very much looking towards 2027. So this competition is really to try and find out, where are Paraguay at the moment, because I would say this is a world-class competition when you consider the teams that are in there, like you just mentioned, USA, Canada, both top 10 ranked teams, Brazil, Colombia. You've got really, I would say in a way it's stronger, the Women's Gold Cup, than you would see in the men's Copa America that we're going to have this summer, or even because of the strength of the CONCACAF teams. So it really is that kind of test. Let's see. I'm very interested to see what team he puts out on Sunday. He refused to talk about it, by the way. We asked him, but he said he's still processing the Costa Rica game before thinking about Canada. But it might be that kind of game where do I want to try a few new things, knowing that I probably won't get the result, and then go all out against an El Salvador team, which they will definitely feel they can beat. The El Salvador team is very young. Is a lot of girls playing college football in the US, so it is not kind of seasoned professionals like most of that Paraguay team. Last night, you had in the starting lineup of Paraguay 9 of the 11 players play abroad, between Argentina, Spain, Portugal, and Brazil. So you have a very strong team, a lot of young players, of course, but they have some of that experience. So you would feel with this kind of group of players, they can definitely take on El Salvador, get through, and then, like you say, it opens up. But I don't think this is something they're looking to really win. But of course, they're looking to get as much experience as they can on the road to 2027.
100%. I think certainly for them, it's a good confidence boost to allow them to grow, and hopefully, you never know with these type of tournaments. It could spur a surprise. We've kind of seen that beforehand. So I guess we have to wait and see how Paraguay can do. in this competition. As we switch gears to the actual country itself, we had the big game happening on the weekend, the Superclasico, Olimpia versus Cerro Porteño at the Defensores del Chaco. And certainly, Ralph, this was a game that I think for both teams, they had to come in with the result. They needed to get a win on this one because of the circumstances that we spoke about last week. And unfortunately, it didn't go that way. It came off very well for Olimpia right there and there in the first half, where Kevin Parsuhic, who played in the Preolímpico, won the Preolímpico with Paraguay and Venezuela. He scored the opening goal, but then it was Alfo Oviedo who got the equalizer right at the end in the 79th minute. And I think ultimately for both teams, they're going to feel disappointed. I think certainly this was always going to be a tight affair, but looking at how the table is right now, Libertad are leading the way with 14 points. You still have Sportivo Luqueño right above them, Guarani, Lo de Mayo, who were able to capitalize on the points that they were able to get against Cerro Porteño from that game that was suspended. And then you have the teams going back. I mean, this is an opportunity for both these. This was the opportunity for both these teams to kind of close the gap, and now they're kind of way further back. And honestly, I think if I'm Cerro Porteño and I'm looking right now, it's not a position that they're used to. Right now, having four teams above them, they're usually always above in the top two, top three, fighting there. But this is a really delicate situation that Victor Bernay has had the squad. And, I'm not going to say a lot about Palermo and Olimpia because I think it was their first game. It was a Superclasico. I think they understood kind of the circumstances that they're in. But again, for both these teams, they're not in the position that they need to be when they want to contend for this Apertura title. And I think the way that if they continue to do this and the way that Libertad and other teams are going to perform, it's not going to look good for them right at the end of the season.
It's shaping up like another Libertad title, isn't it? Because when you look at the teams you've just mentioned that are they're in the running with them, the Sportivo Luqueño, Dos de Mayo, I'm pretty sure they're not going to be able to last the course. Guarani, we could see it traditionally they've managed to kind of fight and stay up there, but they don't usually win titles. So you're really looking at the two protagonists from the Superclásico, Olimpia and Cerro, to try and do something, and the draw was the worst result possible. The result I predicted, by the way, but it was I think it's like the fourth straight draw they've had in the Superclásico, and it's what we were sort of talking about, that neither team is really playing that well, and almost they're not good enough to win the game. They're good enough not to lose it, as we saw, but no one really seems to have that spark to be able to do something special. We had that moment from Parsahouk, which was for me very surprising. I haven't seen him in that kind of running in the channels and showing that kind of pace, but that was really just a flash, right? And then I think Olimpia sat back. Cerro were unable to exploit the possession or take advantage of having more possession. Cerro looked very flat until they made some changes in the second half. And I think really when you saw like Peralta and Vieira playing together that had done so well in the Preolímpico, then Cerro tried to get a bit more spark, but it was still, they were playing very much a very direct game, right? Throwing long balls up to Churim. I didn't like Fernando Fernandez's positioning. He was playing really far back. But eventually it comes off because of Olympia's defensive frailties, which we've talked about a lot. I don't think they haven't really found a solid partnership, I would say, in the last kind of 2 years. They've had some good players because they have Mateo Gamarra, who's gone off to Brazil since then, but they've never really had that partnership where we're very sure of these two that are going to be our defense. And it was something Chiquiasi struggled with, and now it's something that Palermo's going to have to work out as well, I think, if his team are going to be able to compete. So it was a game. Yeah, it was a game that I think both teams didn't really show that they have that quality that they can go on and challenge Libertad. So it's really looking like Libertad's title to lose.
And of course, I think this comes as an argument really of how one team has kind of dominated really an entire league, and Libertad have done that. And that's why I said that it was going to be hard for any team to really stop them. And certainly it's looking that way. I mean, I know the old gist and kind of cliche of saying it's a farmers league. It kind of is looking like that, Rob. I don't want to be rude and anything, but it does seem that way, that Libertad it just doesn't seem that either Libertad are just so good at the moment that it seems like no one can stop them, or that the other teams are just so underwhelming, and it's not like them to be in this position as well.
I like it that you call it a farmers league and Libertad playing La Huerta, which is
There you go.
basically the little farm, I guess, or the
Yeah,
small
yeah.
allotment, which is
Humaredo
based,
as well.
yeah, which is based on where the ground is, where it traditionally was in Asuncion before they built it. But anyway, we're seeing this, yeah, we're seeing this pattern of domination. It does happen though in Paraguayan football, and especially with the short league cycle, you can easily win. If you have a good year, you win 2 league titles. And so we've seen these patterns. Remember, Olimpia won 4 in a row with Garnero. Now Libertad is having that period of dominance, which they also had, say, in the mid 2000s. I remember, I think they picked up 4 in a row around then. So you're seeing some of these cycles, but what it isn't doing is generating much excitement. I know what you mean, because you're seeing the same teams winning. They're really the same teams competing at the moment. And right now, looking at it, there doesn't seem to be an end to that period of domination, because Libertad just produced player after player. They had the goal scorer Rodrigo Villalba, who's 17. He's like the next person to come off the conveyor belt after Enciso and Gomez and Enzo Gonzalez. So they keep producing these players, and they're reaping the rewards. And then of course they have the money to go out and buy big players if they do need to, because they've brought back, Oscar Cardoso, Lorenzo Melgarejo, Tito Villalba, all those players in recent years. So it's a very difficult combination, right? To try and stop some of that dominance. That said, I think what we've got at the moment, and because of the Preolímpico, it's kind of proved this. We do have an exciting time with a lot of really good young Paraguayan players, and so we get some good quality. And I think we've seen that maybe if we want to move on to kind of a continental competition, right? We're starting to see teams getting results. So we had Nacional and Trinidense this week.
Yeah, obviously big results for both these two teams in the competition. I think certainly we saw really Nacional getting a big result against a really good team like Atlético Nacional. Certainly always a tough team to face, and I think certainly the 1-0 result is a good one. I mean, certainly Diego Duarte getting the goal is an important thing, but it's always going to be very hard now going to return that result over there in Colombia, in Medellin. The same thing for Trinidense. They got a 1-1 draw over there, the Defensores against El Nacional. So you got Paraguayan teams in kind of national derbies, you would say. But I think it's going to be more difficult for Trinidense rather than it is for Nacional. I think it seems like Paraguayan teams have kind of given Atlético Nacional their number recently. I think we saw that with even Olimpia as well. But it's going to be tough for both these teams to really qualify to the next stage. But it would be big for them for confidence boost, for an economical standpoint, for them to do it. But I don't think I see it, Ralph. I really don't.
You're not confident. I agree with you on Trinidense. I think this year's Trinidense team isn't even as good as last year's, the one that got them to this stage. A few players have moved on, and they didn't go all out to try and bring in a team to build it for the Copa Libertadores. It was too much of a financial risk. Like you say, if they get to the group stage, it's a huge financial plus. But if they don't, and if they had spent all this money on bringing players in, it would be very dangerous for the club. It's for people that don't know, it's a very historic team, but it's tiny. The ground is just a few thousand people. It's in a very traditional suburb of Asuncion, like residential area, and that stadium's not going to get expanded because of where it is, and they're actually have a very big local rival in Rubio New. So traditionally that kind of area of Asuncion's been divided, so the fan base isn't going to grow that much. So they couldn't really take this big financial risk, and I think at altitude in Quito, it's going to be really difficult for them to hold on and get a positive result. For Nacional, I don't know what to make of them this year. I've liked Pumpido. He's been a good coach in the different teams he's been at, like Sol de America. I really liked how he got them playing. but I haven't seen it much with Nacional so far this year, and especially in the league, they've been pretty poor. The games I've watched, but they're finding something in the Copa Libertadores, and interestingly, their home record has been excellent for a long time now. I think at Defensores del Chaco, they've won something like 10 of their last 13, or it's a really strong record for a team like Nacional competing against these big teams. You mean Atlético Nacional, obviously a Copa Libertadores champions, so there's a real pedigree there, and they managed to beat them with Diego Duarte. Diego Duarte, who has now scored 3 goals in 2 Copa Libertadores games. He's this kid that he broke a bunch of records in youth level with Olimpia. He looked like he was going to be the next big thing. I think he captained Paraguay under 17s, if I remember correctly. So big promise. And he's one of that generation where the pandemic really came at the wrong time, because it was the moment to maybe make the leap. And then he didn't. Youth football got suspended for so long. So they kind of dropped off the radar. When he finally got his chance at Olimpia, he didn't really make his mark. But there was that talent there. There was that possibility that if he could just find his scoring form again at senior level, he could make a difference. And it looks like now we're seeing it with this really well taken goal on his left foot. Wasn't a particularly easy angle, because it seemed the first touch had taken him a bit too far away, but he slotted it home, and he's looking really good. So I'm happy for Duarte finally trying to get some of that form now at senior level that we saw a long time ago when he was a youth player. And I think Nacional, Pumpido, like I say, he's a clever coach. They might be able to get that draw out in Medellin, which would obviously see them qualify.
It will be a very important test for both these two teams to be able to qualify to the next stage. So we'll keep an eye and see what happens to them as we switch gears right now to the Paraguayans abroad. And actually, we have some kind of breaking news that we'll kind of talk about right before we speak about Diego Gomez. It seems that Roberto de Chervi, the Brighton and Hove Albion manager, has confirmed that Julio Enciso will be back on the bench for Brighton against Everton this weekend. So obviously a big boost. Enciso hasn't been playing since August, since he had that meniscus injury. It's been a long time since he's been able to play. Obviously, this is the Brighton side that just got drawn against Roma in the Europa League. They'll play them on March 7th. So, this comes at a really good time for Enciso, where all these games are being congested. Obviously, you got the FA Cup as well that they play against against Wolves on Wednesday as well. So, yeah, this comes at a good time for Enciso to return with all these games happening for Brighton.
Yeah, totally. It's so important for him to get back on the pitch playing, not just because selfishly we want to see him in the summer, right? Either in Copa America or Olympics, but also because I think he needs to occupy himself with football. He's had a lot of downtime. He's been obviously injured trying to get back, but a lot of time on his hands. And when you're a young person in pretty much alone in another country, these players they can slip away if they're not focused on their football. So this now he has finally football to be back focused on, and what we've seen, we've never seen him, of course, have such a long-term injury in his career, but what we've always seen with Julio Enciso is he has this incredible mentality that when it's his moment or when it's his time to prove himself, he steps up to the plate. I mean, I remember we talked about this, I think it was a year ago, and I was saying, he might end up going on loan. Is he going to be able to do it? And he got his chance and he took it so well, right? With those goals against Chelsea, the Man City goal that was nominated for the Puskás, but just his overall play, he really forced his way into what was a very good Brighton team this time last year, and which is still, like you're saying, a very strong team because they're still in Europa League, they're still in the FA Cup. They got plenty to play for as they try and look for that European qualification for next season. So I'm really happy that he's going to be back on the pitch, getting some minutes, and we can see him. Hopefully, all his Instagram stories will be him scoring goals now, and not just photos snapping around London or wherever he's been. So I'm really glad to see him back on the pitch this weekend.
100%. And it's someone that has also made us proud over the last few days was Diego Gomez. Diego Gomez obviously coming back, where he was probably the standout player for Paraguay and in the entire competition. in the Pro Olímpico as the captain, scoring 5 goals. And here he is making a debut for Inter Miami this season in the 2-0 win against Real Salt Lake, which also had another Paraguayan playing in Brian Ojeda. But it was Diego who stole all the headlines. It wasn't Messi. It wasn't Luis Suarez. It was Diego Gomez who got the second goal after a really good combination. Diego Gomez winning the ball before Messi picking up the ball and going all the way past the defenders before slotting it to Suarez, and then Suarez passing it to Gomez to score the second and decisive goal. So that's a huge confidence boost. And I think what was also important as well, that this comes days before when Tata Martino had spoken about him given the opportunity to only play in one competition, be it the Copa America or the Olympics, as of course he is still under the age of 23. So yeah, I mean, these goals and these performances are really going to cause a big conundrum, I think, for Dani Garnero or Carlos Harris-Halier. And, you've spoken about it after the game, thanks to our good friend, Andrea, who works in Miami. She said that, certainly the way that she spoke to Diego Gomez saying that, there was a lot of things to get better. And ultimately it'll be up to the Paraguayan FA to really decide where he'll play. If it's going to be the Copa America or the Olympics. Andrea Yana is doing a really good job there. But yeah, Ralph, I mean, this is a really big issue, and at least in a good problem to have, is what to do with Diego Gomez. Do we keep him as a really important player? Because I think he's kind of shown that in his recent performances for the national team that he is an important player in that midfield. Or does the Paraguay FA just want to go all out and really attempt to go for the Olympics? It's going to be a huge debate from here on out until the summer, our summer here in the United States, and see what we're going to do with Diego Gomez and even players like Enciso as well, who is also coming back and of course is under the age of 23 as well.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think you can see why Tata Martino was such a great coach for Paraguay and what he brings, because he just brought clarity, right? You're talking about the debate that's going to happen in Paraguay, and I'm sure it is going to happen, unfortunately. But he's been very clear, right? He said you get one tournament, so now Diego Gomez doesn't even have to think about, will they let me play two? Good, like he knows I've only got one, and I've got MLS to focus on, and there he goes, and he hits the ground running with a goal in his first game. And by the way, I think that was really interesting as well. That the goal itself was kind of a microcosm of what he was doing on the pitch, right? He was playing much higher up than we saw at times last season. He was used in different ways last season by Martino, but I think now Martino's allowing him to play higher up, which is where he needs to be. He wins. He's so good at ball recovery high up the pitch. He wins. It's him that wins the ball and then finishes off the move. And that's a role where he's much more comfortable in, not kind of further back playing alongside Busquets, where he did end up playing quite a lot last season. So hopefully he can continue in that role, and then is thinking about how can we fit him into the national team and which national team and where his best role will be. If he plays Olympics, it's going to be quite clear because he's going to be the captain and he'd be the lead player. If he plays national team in Copa America, then you have to think about all the other players that are in there, right? He still isn't, I would say, kind of a first name on the team sheet kind of player. That midfield has been chopped and changed by managers prior to Garnero and now Garnero himself, as they're trying to work that out. So that would be another conundrum. I would love it if Harris-Halier and Garnero can make the decision on these types of players now, right? Well, Enciso and Gomez, those that are eligible for both, because then we can start planning and we can focus a lot more. I don't think we're going to get that decision before the Russia friendly, because I'm sure that's where Garnero wants to try some things. But I really like the fact that Martino came out and pretty much has put that to bed, right? There's no possibility he plays both tournaments. Interestingly, he hasn't said the same thing about Messi, but I think Messi has a very particular contract. But I know the MLS won't want him away for that long in those two tournaments as well. So that's a whole different tug of war. But the good thing for Diego Gomez is he can be fully focused on this Inter Miami season from now on in.
Yeah, definitely. I think it ultimately kind of is a win-win, because certainly if you get Gomez or on the Copa America team or on the Olympic teams, it's a huge boost for them. But ultimately, I think it's ultimately have to be decided. And I think what's good about him is that he's kind of cool with it. That it's like he's not too pressured about saying, "Oh, I want to play here instead of here." Ultimately, it'll be best for what's best for the Paraguayan FA and what's best for Jara Salier and for Garnedo to have. This is it's a good thing because obviously Garnedo and Jara Salier have dealt with him for Garnedo has dealt with him for quite some time at club and national team level, so he knows him better than probably anyone else. Jara Salier obviously trusts him as his captain, and Tata Martino has kind of nurtured him into that player that can hopefully allow him to develop into a better player, possibly transfer to Europe. So it's kind of a situation where, let these guys handle what's best for him, as long as he continues to keep a cool head and have good performances like he did the other day for Inter Miami. So we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens to him, to Julio Enciso, and to a lot of these Paraguayan players as we close off another great episode of Guarani Vision. For myself, Roberto Rojas, and Ralph Hanna, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.